Okay, being recorded. Well, let's see if we can move stuff around here. Forgot I was going to do this. Put this down here. There we go. You guys see that okay?
Nice and clear.
All right.
Nice.
It's that HD resolution.
I know. Does it really make a difference? I don't know. I don't think I can zoom in either. So your problem, not mine. I can't make mine any bigger either. It sucks. Not loving this. Okay. Got that going. Okay. So this is a governor. It's a cutaway. It would never work this way. So, but just some of the basic pieces for now. So up here is where the control wheel actually go on this side. And so here's the flyweights. So over speed, on speed, under speed. And so the pilot control will push down on the speeder spring. And the more pressure it is, the more it's going to want to put this flyweights in, the faster it's going to spin before it comes out into an on-speed condition or overspeed. So it's got the speeder spring, and then it, right here, you can see that it moves the pilot valve up and down. So I can slide the pilot valve out. And there's the pilot valve. There's the pilot valve with the little passageways that are going to go in and around through there that will dictate which way the oil is going to go. Pull it apart a little bit more. We can see there's at least half of the oil pump, and the pilot valve is sliding in and out of this part right down here, which you can't really see, but it is. And what else do we have? That's about it on this thing because it's kind of taken apart. So you can see the oil comes in through this area right here and can drain out through the end of the shaft right there. I'll go through that a little bit later in more detail, but just to show you what it looks like.
You lost 2 parts.
I what?
So you left 2 parts out on the table like an O-ring.
That is just a piece of wire that was sitting on my desk. And those are just nuts that I'm not going to put back on. Okay.
That was helpful. Thanks for showing us that.
Was it really? It didn't feel like I went through much because I wanted to bring home an actual one, but they're just disgustingly full of oil, and I wasn't about to put it in my office. So
You should bring one with the propeller
no.
attached.
Hey, Kevin,
Yeah.
are there any keepers on that spring, or is it just sitting there like that?
Just sitting there like that.
Okay.
And that's going to become an issue that I'm going to talk about. What happens to the springs, or what happens to this when the speeder spring breaks, because they are prone to breaking. Looking for, let's make this one good. All right, so what do we got here? Again, complain, grumble about the new thing. Complicated. Okay, we'll write some notes. All right, prop governors. Propeller governors. Purpose. It is an RPM sensing device which responds to change in engine RPM by directing oil pressure to or from a prop to change the blade angle. So it is an RPM sensing device. Sensing device which responds, responds, it's not easy to talk and write at the same time, responds to a change to a change in engine speed by directing oil pressure to or from a prop, to change blade angle, And a constant speed prop holds the engine at a constant RPM. Constant speed prop holds the engine at a constant RPM, by varying propeller pitch, varying the propeller pitch, the prop pitch or blade angle. Okay. The RPM will be constant regardless of aircraft speed. So the RPM will be constant regardless of aircraft speed or throttle changes within reason. The prop has its limits. It can only do so much. All right, basic components. All right, guys, kind of caught up a little bit more. Basic components. We'll talk about the booster. The booster gear pump. So a governor takes engine oil pressure and boosts it to about 150 to 200 and, well, I wrote 275 on my notes, 275 PSI. And it varies. It varies depending on the engine prop application. I had the engine I told you about a little bit ago with the Hamilton prop on it. There's a version of that I'll talk about in a little bit that actually is a constant speed version, and it uses a governor. And so this is a really rare engine. And the transfer sleeves were this most bizarre looking thing I'd ever seen. It was a series of about 8 or 10 what looked like gold oil rings that fit around the the crankshaft into a cylinder. And so I took it apart and it was like, wow. And I knew I would have a problem with them. So I was very careful with them. And I looked around and I was told that they're absolutely irreplaceable and that they were, a component, the kind of the end component of this engine. Once those were gone, the engine was gone. And so I built this whole engine up, and the last component was the prop governor, and the customer didn't like our price on the prop governor overhaul with our prop governor guy. And so he demanded that he could send it to his guy, and his guy overhauled the governor. And this particular governor on this particular engine wasn't supposed to be over like 120 PSI or like over 150. It was really, really on the bottom end of things. And the customer had somebody do it up on the high end of things. And so when it got installed in the engine, eventually the problem started to show up, and he hired somebody to take the engine back apart to see what it was. And all of those rings were paper. They were like razor blades. There was almost nothing left of them. And so yeah, he was very angry with us, but we were like, you had your guy overhaul the prop governor. You had your guy put the prop governor back on it. We never even touched it. So, and you had your guy put the prop on. So the prop and the prop governor were all put on by you and your people outside of our control. So sucks for you. He was very unhappy about that, but not my problem. Well, I wasn't happy about it, but I'll tell you that story to say, make sure your prop governor guy knows what he's doing. So the pump, like all these other gear pumps, the pump is a constant displacement. Constant displacement gear type pump. Just like the oil pump. It is directly connected to the engine. So it is directly connected to the engine driven gears, to the engine driven gears. It may be mounted on the front or the back of the engine. Lycoming puts them on the back, and Continental tends to put them on the front. So I'll put that may be accessory pad or crankcase mounted, maybe accessory or crankcase mounted. I should put accessory pad. That makes more sense. Accessory pad. Or what was I saying? Crankcase mounted. Then if it's a round engine, they may put them in the front, they may put them in the back. It just depends. All right, key component to that is you must have a pressure relief valve. And that's what's going to set the pressure. So let me see, to prevent too much pressure,
Kevin,
Yeah,
does it need cooling or not?
nope. Well, with Continental, it's right up front, right in the airstream anyway, so it's going to get a little bit of cooling. And they get hot. They get amazingly hot. To prevent too much pressure, a pressure relief valve, allows excessive pressure to be turned to the inlet side of the pump. So to prevent too much pressure, a pressure relief valve allows excessive pressure to be returned to the inlet side of the pump, to the inlet side of the pump. And it really is just right there, the inlet side, boom, and there it is. All right, so in addition to the pressure relief valve, we had the oil pump gears, we have the flyweights. So flyweights are connected to the drive shaft of the governor, connected to the drive shaft of the governor. They are L-shaped. So 1, 2, 3, 3. As the governor speeds up, as the governor speeds up, governor speeds up, centrifugal force moves the flyweight outward, moves the flyweights outward, so like that outward, against speeder spring pressure and lifts the pilot valve. Oops, that got bad. And lifts the pilot valve. And I'll put a little sub note here. This allows oil to be sent to prop or drained from prop. And it just depends on what the configuration of the prop is. I'll be right back. It's not bad, I just worry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we could say the opposite to that too. Let's see. 4. As the governor slows down. Slows down. The spring, how do I say that? Well, I'll do this. Loss of centrifugal force allows the spring pressure to push the flyweights in this position.
You said the spring?
Yep. As the governor slows down, loss of centrifugal force allows the spring pressure, there we go, sorry, spring pressure to push the flyweights in and lowers the pilot valve. Lowers the pilot valve. And then I could just cut and paste here. This allows oil to be sent to the prop or drained from the prop. Depends. This allows oil to be sent to prop or drained from prop. Again, it just depends on the configuration of the propeller. And if the governor is on speed, if the governor is on speed, the flyweights and spring are in equilibrium. And then I would say it looks just like that. All right, you guys caught up? All right, talk about pilot valve. Pilot valve. All right, moves, up and down, to one of three positions, to one of three positions. One, open passages from pump to propeller, open passageways. From pump to prop. Two, open passages from prop to drain. Or three, block all passages. So that oil goes nowhere. I'm going to skip this next point here. I just wrote an oil route, which I don't think we need to write. I told you about it, and you've already seen oil routes, but basically just says oil route. Well, the accessory case mounted governor uses an external line to the front of the crankcase. Crankcase mounted governor has no external line. So another way of saying that is Lycoming, they put their governors on the back. And so the oil comes right off of the accessory case right into the governor. So you can't see the oil line coming in, and that's great. Then it goes to the governor, but then they run an oil line, an external oil line from the governor all the way to the front of the engine where it goes into the oil transfer area. Now, the problem with that is you're boosting engine oil pressure up to 250 PSI. If you get any sort of leak at all in that prop governor line, you're going to quickly lose all of your oil everywhere. Now you have no engine oil left because it is going to pump it out overboard right fast. And that's what was happening. So this oil line is under an airworthiness directive. So number one, all of the fittings have to be steel fittings. You can identify them that they're black, not blue. So you have to have steel fittings, and the governor line has to be stainless steel and mounted and secured in precise locations and then inspected. Before, they had some people making stuff out of aluminum and they would just crack and break off. And so this was a real problem. Continental, on the other hand, they just mount theirs in such a way up front that oil comes from an inside oil passage into the governor, does its thing in the governor, and goes through an internal passage out. There are no external lines. So I like the way Continental does it a whole lot better. You get rid of that extra line, which is a problem. So that's all I really wrote here. That's important. And I already talked about that. So let me see. All right, so then that brings me to speeder spring. Even though I already talked about it, there's some real interesting things about the speeder spring, or not interesting. There's things you have to think about. And test questions that I'll ask you about in the speeder spring, because everything, it's the variable in there. So the speeder spring applies spring pressure to the flyweight. Speeder spring applies spring pressure to the flyweights. And remember, it's the cockpit control. All you're doing in the cockpit when you move the blue lever is adding or removing spring pressure. That's all it does. So without spring pressure, the flyweights, basically without spring pressure, the governor would think it's in a constant overspeed position. Flyweights out. So without spring pressure, the flyweights would move outward and lift with the flyweights. Flyweights would move outward in this fashion, outward, with the slightest of RPM, with the slightest RPM, the slightest RPM. So it would be in a constant overspeed, I would say, constant or perpetual overspeed. That would be bad. And that's exactly what happens when the spring breaks. So if your spring would break, remember that, it's going to go into an overspeed. And so if the spring breaks and the governor says, I'm in an overspeed, it's going to send a message to the propeller through oil and say, we are in an overspeed condition, prop. You had better increase pitch. And that's what it'll want to do. The prop will go into a high pitch, and it's going to stay there. And the prop's going to keep saying, we're overspeeding. And the prop will say, well, I can't do any better than I'm doing right now.
What do you do in that case as a pilot?
Nothing you can do. Look for a place to, well, you're just going to be in high RPM. I'm sorry, low RPM. Overspeed, low RPM. Yeah, high pitch, low RPM. And that's just the way it's going to be. So go find a place to land. The speeder spring, speeder spring allows the flyweights to move outward. The speeder spring allows the flyweights to move outward, at the right RPM, at the proper RPM, and gives pilot control. Cockpit controls. Cockpit controls are attached to the speeder spring, attached to the speeder spring, and vary the tension, vary the tension. So more tension is going to want to cause the flyweights to roll in. If you roll the flyweights in, more tension is going to make them want to go that way. If you did that, then that is going to say that we are in an underspeed condition. And if we're in an underspeed condition, it's going to say we're in an underspeed condition, which is going to make the prop flatten out, which means you want higher RPM. Higher RPM. So less tension. If I remove tension from them, the flyweights are going to come out, and it's going to tell the engine suddenly that everything's going to think that you are overspeeding, and it'll increase the prop pitch, which is the same as saying we are in lower RPM. So really, that's all you're doing when you move the little blue handle. Move it forward, you are adding more tension to the speeder springs. If you move it back, you're adding less tension to the speeder spring. And that is exactly what you're doing.
And the lower RPM is towards feather, right?
What's that?
The lower RPM is towards feather, right?
Yes. All right, you guys caught up with that? Got that
Finally.
cemented into your brain. What do they say? You only remember something like 10% of what somebody says in a lecture. So I always wonder what 10% you remember.
I'll
So
remember.
it was 1%.
Oh, probably 1%.
I'll
That's
tell
why
you
I'm only
what,
telling you 1% of my notes, because I figure you're only gonna remember it anyway. So I'm only telling you the important 1%.
We're only going to remember the 1% of the 1%.
Which is 0.1.
I've been
That's
trying
a
to
passing
like
grade, though, right?
get the flyweight drawings
Passing grade.
where you have them like in an L with your hands.
Wait, what? You talking to me? What's going on?
Yeah, can
Yeah, I
you
said
mute Steve, please?
No. I'm explaining something. Jeez,
Who are
I
you
was
explaining it to?
you.
Oh, I already know it.
Well, but your whole hand thing is very confusing with the flyweights with the L's. I get that's what they look like when you took it apart, but it's like it's hard to kind of visualize that just on paper.
Well, then just ignore it. If it confuses you, ignore it. I don't know what to say.
Okay.
Or was I supposed to find a different way of saying it?
That's what I'm saying. Like, just figure out a new way to, because I feel like that's very like tedious and very just like, oh, thanks, Hector. Okay, I knew myself.
I'll work on that. Okay. We got that. Everybody's good. How about Janet? I haven't heard from her today. Is she even here? Is the only thing I remember from lecture. Is it break time yet? Can we go home early? All right.
Can we
That's
go
gonna
home early?
move
It's
me-
can we end lecture early now?
Yeah, you just turn yourself off right there. I'll hardly even notice.
Aren't we ending Wednesday?
Yeah, we can end it right now if you want. I'll just post the test. You guys good?
No,
Just full send it straight to the F.
All right. Okay. So let's move on. So now we know how a governor works. Now let's move that into how it works with the propeller. So we're going to go constant speed props. Constant speed props. Finally there. All right. So theory. Theory of operation. Well, define it. So definition. What is a constant speed prop? It is a propeller that automatically, automatically varies the blade angle, to achieve a constant engine RPM, to achieve a constant engine RPM. So as we have talked about, the propeller, the prop will use, we used a fixed force, which is called, well, I'll do that later. Fixed force to drive the prop, to either high or low blade angles, to either a high or low blade angle. All right, so you use fixed force to drive the prop either to high or low, which you already know what that is because we talked about the counterweights on the Hamilton standard. But I will tell you anyway, the fixed forces are 1, centrifugal twisting force. This is for you, MJ. Centrifugal twisting.
What did I do?
You made me write it out. Centrifugal twisting force of the blade, or, these are ors, or centrifugal twisting force acting on counterweights. Wow, I could have really abbreviated that one, MJ. That was CTF acting on CW right there. I would have been done, out of here, see the world. Or, I could add some others here. Spring pressure acting on a piston. So these are some of the fixed forces that propeller manufacturers are going to use to their advantage. Well, the centrifugal twisting force, I should say acting on the blade, sounds like a better way of putting it. You're not going to get rid of that unless you get rid of the blade. But remember, you can change it by putting counterweights on. And so the counterweights are going to negate that. All right, so we have, make sure everybody's good and caught up. Well, we really haven't. I asked Janet how she was doing. She hasn't even answered me. Is Janet here today? Let me see. She's not, huh? Uh-oh, busted. Let me see, who else don't we have here? Oh, I got another row. I'm sorry, I missed the row down here. I told you I'm not used to this new thing. Janet, are you here? And we've got Shigun. You're the last guy on the list. You were hiding too. I've already heard Zach complaining a few times. He's got his terrible picture.
Hey, did you say something to me, Kevin?
I asked if you were here.
Oh, yeah. I have my mic on mute.
That's all right. I was just picking on bottom row people today. And I was talking to Janet, who's not here today.
Oh, yeah, I'm right here.
I see you're here. All right, I'm gonna slide that over. We good? Eric, you're fine? Yeah, cool.
Yes, I am.
All right. Okay, let's see. So the propeller will use fixed force to drive the propeller to either high or low blade angle. So in addition to the fixed force, we got to have a variable force. So the prop uses a variable force. You got to unmute there. Again, there we go. Okay, propeller uses a variable force to drive the propeller in the opposite, variable force to drive, I said the propeller, I should say to drive the blades in the opposite direction, in the opposite direction of the fixed force. And the variable force is engine oil from the governor. And then I got a whole section in here about the governor, which I don't have to repeat because technically if we were in class, that whole talk about the governor would have ended around on a Thursday and we'd be talking about this on a Monday. And by that time you'd already forgotten what a governor is. But since it's only been an hour since I talked about a governor, I'm kind of hoping you remember what one is. So I would say as a governor, as engine changes RPM, the governor flyweights move the pilot valve to either drain engine oil from the prop or send engine oil to the prop, but you know that.
Gavin Newsom controls the propeller.
Controls everything.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Controls the fact that you're sitting at home right now. Actually, I don't want to be very political at all, but I've been watching some of his speeches, and some of the stuff he does, I'm impressed with. I don't normally vote that direction, but
Impressed in a good way or in a bad way?
I thought that the task force that he set up and the partnership that he set up with the other West Coast governors was impressive, and taking good leadership.
I think the rogue state on the West Coast is Arizona.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they're talking about like just opening everything up, like,
I like
at the
Arizona.
beginning of next month.
Like I said, I don't want to be political, but since you brought it up, I'm more of the freedom kind of libertarian sort of side, where I say open it all up and let us have our freedoms. And if you want to go mass mingle at the beach, then do it. The whole concept of outside is closed is not good for me. So
Well,
hear about all the protests.
Bernie is not in the running.
I know Bernie's not running. You know, the stock market went up like thousands of points when Bernie dropped out. So, all right, let's see. How you
Janet
guys
just
doing?
messaged me. She said that her mic was off because her kid was in the bathroom and she didn't want you guys to hear that. So,
Who said what?
well, I guess Janet could just say it. I don't want to like speak for. I don't know. She
Well,
just
then
messaged me. She, okay.
She was gone. Janet, we were talking about you quite a bit while you were gone, asking where you were and all kinds of stuff. And
I was gonna message you privately, Kev, but I couldn't do that, so I don't know.
taking crap. TMI. All right, so we've got that. So let's put it together. So let's talk about a particular prop. So let's talk about a constant speed prop. Let's bring a constant speed prop into the mix. See if I can find one. My slides are kind of jacked up. Where is this one? Oh, here we go. Let's talk about, get away from there, slideshow. This constant speed prop. Now, if you're an astute person, what does this prop remind you of?
The one that has a name that I can't think of.
The Hamilton Standard 2-position prop?
Yeah.
Well, that is because this is the exact same photo that I used to tell you about the Hamilton Standard 2-position prop. And now I'm telling you, this is the Hamilton Standard constant speed prop because you can't tell it, because it's the same prop.
You only got one photo.
I've only got one. I didn't need to. And I purposely picked the same photo when I wanted to talk about this prop, because a Hamilton Standard 2-position prop only differs in the fact that you add a governor. So if you add a governor to this propeller and add a governor, you've got a constant speed prop. So when we looked at it before, the controls were, you had two positions in the cockpit: either put oil pressure to it or drain all of the pressure off. And then therefore the prop would go all the way to high pitch or all the way to low pitch. Well, there's all that space in between that it wasn't using. So now if we use a governor, the governor can vary the oil pressure, add a little bit, drain a little bit, block a little bit, and put it in between those two places. So like at one point we said that we looked at a pitch variation between 17 and 22 degrees. Well, now if we had a governor, it can go to 18, 19, 20, 21, or all the places in between. So it's the same thing. So now we can use the same prop and talk about how it's going to do that. So it's just the Hamilton Standard constant speed, which is why I was able to tell the story about how I had a customer with this particular prop, but it's a little bit different because I had a governor. Well, that's all it was. It's just this one. So it's the same prop pretty much basically as the 2 position, but they do change the blade range on it. They open it up a little bit more and uses large springs in the piston to aid centrifugal force action. So you're just going to help out the centrifugal weights by adding some springs up in here in the piston, give it a little bit more range, but otherwise it's going to look exactly the same. And as we know now, the counterweights, and you looking at this picture, I like this picture because you think about when you spin it and the centrifugal force, if you think about the blade, it's going to make the blade go into low pitch. But because it's got counterweights, you know, the counterweights, they want to come up here. They want to be up here in line. They don't want to come down here. That doesn't make any sense. Centrifugal force makes things fly outward, and outward is going to be up and over here. So it's going to do that, and it's going to drive the blade to the high pitch towards feather. And by adding, and there's a spring in here that's going to help it. Now by adding governor pressure, governor's going to sense that and say, oh, you need to slow down. It's going to, governor sits up here somewhere on this one. Usually it's probably on the other side a little bit. So the governor is going to add oil pressure. The oil is going to come through the middle of the crankshaft, out the middle of the crankshaft, press on the piston and move the cylinder forward. And that is going to bring the counterweight back down here. Remember, the counterweight's not very happy down here. Doesn't want to be there, but oil pressure wins, and it's going to put the blades in a low blade angle. So otherwise, it's going to work pretty much the same way as what we talked about. It's just that it has the option to find this space in the middle. So let me see what. Got a lot of notes about this, but we really just.
Sorry to burst your bubble, Kev, but it is dinner time.
It's dinner time. Oh, thank God. I didn't know what I was going to say next. So, all right. Well, I probably don't have any dinner, so I'm going to come back hangry. So be prepared.